Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 92 of the Learn and Work Smarter podcast. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than usual. You'll see why in a second. So, a few months ago, I released a free video training for parents called How to Help Your Student Handle School Like a Pro Without Study Frustration, Assignment Overwhelm, or all the drama. You can get access to that full training with all of the slides at schoolhabitsuniversity.com/free training. I'm going to leave that link below, okay? If you haven't seen the full training yet, and you are the parent of a student in middle school through graduate school, I highly recommend that you get your hands on it. But in today's episode, I'm going to cover a little bit of what's in that training. Obviously, there are no slides in how I'm presenting it to you now, which is why I want you to get the full thing. But I did think it would be helpful to share a little bit because it is ultra important. And of course, it is related to absolutely everything we talk about here on the podcast. Hello, you are listening to the Learn and Work Smarter podcast, the podcast for students and professionals who want to learn and work smarter. I'm your host, executive function coach, and founder of SchoolHabits.com, Katie Azevedo. As a reminder, everything I mention in today's episode will be linked in the show notes, including a link to the transcript, which you can also find at learnandworksmarter.com/podcast. Today, I'm going to share stories and strategies so you can actually see what changes when students learn the right way to do school. Again, this is essentially an excerpt from a longer training I did. And my goal here is to give you the most important pieces so you can put it to work right away with the understanding that you'll grab the full video at schoolhabitsuniversity.com/free training. Again, it'll be in the description box and all linked below. So you are in the right place today if you're the parent of a student wanting to give your child the best possible chance in school and beyond. Also, if you're tired of doing everything to help your student with their study habits, but you feel like you are getting nowhere and you don't know what else to do. If your student struggles with the demands of learning and maybe has executive dysfunction and or ADHD, or your young adult is a capable student who wants a more efficient way to elevate their academics to gain a competitive edge. Now, honestly, if your teen or your college student is open to listening with you, I highly, highly recommend that. And please invite them to do so. You can just share this podcast or this video with them. Also, you are in the right place if you are the student. Maybe you're in high school, you're in college, you're graduate school, or you're an adult continuing your education. If you're overwhelmed with managing your time and your tasks, you don't know how to study for tests, you feel like something is missing, and you have potential, but you are just not there yet, or you don't know how to get there, I welcome you here too. You're in the right spot for today's episode. So the reality is this. If you or, your student have tried other approaches in the past, and if you have been unsuccessful, it is not your fault, okay? Not only is the education industry full of misinformation, but it also lacks real information about learning and studying and time management and note-taking and other school habits that our kids need to be successful. If you have tried tutors and study hacks that you find randomly on social media or just studying harder, and none of those have worked, again, it's not your fault, and it's not your student's fault either. Our kids are not taught how to learn, and without knowing how to learn, they obviously struggle to do so. They are told to learn vocabulary, but then they're not taught how. They're told to study for exams, but they're not taught how. They are told to take notes and to annotate their text, but they're not taught how. They're told to get better grades, but they're not taught how. Is this their fault? Absolutely not. And that's why we're here today. This conversation is going to expose the myths about learning that are behind why so many bright students who are capable of more are struggling. It's going to give you and your student, or you, hope that there is a different way to do school and that it doesn't have to be so hard. I'm going to teach you the strategies and the systems and the truths that can truly empower your child or you to get better grades with less stress and less overwhelm. And in turn, unlock the academic and career opportunities that they deserve to have. Now, maybe you're sitting here secretly worried that your child, or even you, if you're the student, is not going to be okay. I am the parent of teenagers too. And I know from my own experience as a mom that one of the greatest fears that I have for my children is that they won't be okay and that they won't get what they want from their lives. And I worry that if they don't figure out how to handle school and get good grades and manage themselves, then they're just going to completely destroy their prospects for college, which leads to an unfulfilling career. And yes, I know that sounds dramatic. One homework assignment is not going to derail their entire life, but the cumulative effect of not knowing how to manage time and tasks, the cumulative effect of being disorganized and unable to learn will absolutely have long-term consequences that I don't want my kids to have. So I'm going to show you how to give the student in your life or yourself the best chance possible, the best positioning to fulfill our hopes for them and their hopes for themselves. So let's just kick off with a little visualization so that you can see the possibilities that I'm proposing. Please play along with me here. It is going to help you absorb the rest of the stuff that I'm going to teach you in this episode. So 10 years in the future, picture this, right? Your kid could be stuck, unfulfilled, dependent on others, and completely unable to thrive by themselves. Or 10 years from now, your kid be quite literally living their dream. A diploma they're proud of, a career that provides financial security and happiness, the ability to manage themselves with life management skills so they can support their own needs and maybe those of a future family. The skills I want to teach your student will set them on the path to their dreams. And I know that is corny. I am aware of how cheesy that sounds as it comes out of my mouth, right? But it is true. And it's going to give them the tools they need to thrive, not only in school, but in their futures. Now, can you imagine if your student had the academic skills to succeed in the classroom beyond? And can you imagine if their stress levels improved because they could manage time and stop procrastinating? Can you imagine if their confidence improved because their grades improved because they had actual study skills that made learning easier? Can you imagine if their executive functions were strong enough to plan, initiate, and complete tasks and projects in school and then eventually in their careers? Can you imagine what it would be like for both of you and your student if studying and note-taking and annotating and task management and time management no longer got in the way of actual learning? Please trust me when I tell you that the critical skills your student needs to succeed in high school, college, and their career are teachable skills that they can learn now and use forever. I talk about these skills all the time on this podcast. These are a very particular set of skills that never expire. Now remember, I'm a mom of 2 teens myself, so I am in this with you. And many of you know I'm also a private executive function coach and an ADHD expert. And I have a master's degree in special education and nearly 20 years of teaching experience, both in the private sector, the public high school special education sector, and as an educator in my own private practice. All in all, I have worked one-on-one with over 3,000 students over nearly 2 decades. And so my insights into what we're talking about today aren't opinion. All right, they come from decades of experience, advanced degrees, and those thousands of students that I just mentioned. And I'm not saying that to be like, listen to me, like, look how smart I am. No, I'm only saying that to emphasize the validity of what I'm going to share with you today, because some of it might go against everything you thought you knew and everything that our society has been telling you. Again, not your fault. Now, let me share a story that absolutely changed the way that I teach. Years ago, back when the SAT had a vocabulary section, it doesn't anymore, I asked a student how his vocabulary learning was going because I assigned vocab for homework, and the next time he came in, I was like, how's your vocab going? And he looked at me and he said, not good, because I don't know how to study them. Well, dang, not knowing how to do that could prevent him from excelling on the SAT, which could decrease his college prospects. Kind of important. All right, fast forward to years later, I was in graduate school. A woman in my class burst into tears when the professor reminded us that our papers were due the next day. She confided in me later that she had intended to drop the class after that because she didn't even know it was due. It was a huge paper, and she couldn't envision a way to get it done in time. And then back when I was teaching high school, a colleague of mine kept failing an exam required to teach in public schools in Massachusetts. Like, to be a public high school or a public school teacher, you need to pass the MTEL. She was smart. She just didn't know how to study beyond looking over the prep book. So I shared my study guide with her. I told her how to use it. And she finally passed the test and was able to keep her job. Again, kind of important. Now, the common theme here, students, peers, colleagues, all struggling, not because they're not smart and not because they're not capable, because they have never been taught how to learn. And that's when it hit me. The skeleton key to learning is skills. It is not content. All right, now let's consider the story of one of my students, Morgan. Now, this is not a real name. I never use real names. Privacy matters, but these stories are real, okay? In high school, Morgan was in the top third of her class. She had ADHD, but it was mostly well managed. In her first year of college, her grades crashed. She was so overwhelmed that she actually didn't go back to campus after January break. At that point, it became obvious to me, that's when I started working with Morgan, that she didn't have any foundational study skills. She was accustomed to teachers giving pre-made study guides instead of making her own, of using teachers' slides for notes instead of taking her own notes, even using pre-made digital flashcards like all the teachers assign, right? Instead of writing them herself. And all of these seemingly helpful supports absolutely annihilated her study skills and her academic independence, not to mention her confidence. Well, so what did Morgan do? She learned how to study. She stopped wasting time with hacky methods she found online, and she began using legitimate techniques that truly worked and took way less time than what she was doing. She learned how to manage her time and tasks by developing sustainable systems that she still uses. She tells me about it. She learned how taking notes and annotating correctly were the keys to truly learning the material, reducing how long that she had to study in the end because when she actually knew the information when she sat down to take the test. Now, at first she was doubtful, but when she started seeing the payoff, less stress, no more staying up all night, better grades, she bought into it. And every time that I see somebody like Morgan, I think, oh my gosh, if only you had learned this sooner, it wouldn't have hurt so much. Now, I'm going to talk about the 3 critical points that you need to understand so that your student or you can experience the same transformation as Morgan. Okay, these are 3 myths I'm going to bust, 3 secrets, whatever you want to call them. Secret number 1, studying more is not the secret to being a good student, and it's actually part of the problem. So people are going to tell you that if your young adult could just get more organized, manage their time better, and study harder, they'd succeed in school. I hear this from parents all the time. Like, if only my kid... Sounds logical. Good grades mean better opportunities, right? So if you get good grades, you just study a little more, you just still study a little harder, you just show a little more grit, and you just buckle down a little bit more, right? Then everything works out. But here is why this advice is so wrong. So these essential skills, time management, organization, studying, all of those, right, are skills that your kid hasn't even been taught. In other words, your student doesn't have these skills to begin with. We assume our kids are born knowing how to study and learn, or, it's just one of these things that they're just going to figure out, like they're going to figure it out in school. But nobody ever sits them down and shows them how to do it. Teachers do their best with the little bit of amount of time that they have teaching the content. They do not have time for this. And looking back, it was probably the same for you. Did anybody ever sit you down and teach you how to study, how to organize your life, how to manage your time? Isn't that all the kind of stuff that you're listening to this podcast, right? To figure out how to do? Doing something more or harder without knowing how to do it correctly in the first place is ineffective, and frankly, it's really frustrating for everybody involved. And worse, if students don't succeed with what they're told to be doing more of, they internalize that it is somehow their fault, that they weren't smart enough or weren't trying hard enough. And not only is that inaccurate, but it's honestly not fair. Now, let me give you a concrete way to think about this. It is like, well, actually, it's not really concrete. It's more of like an analogy, but like whatever. It's like asking our kids to build a house, right? Without ever giving them a blueprint or any training in construction. We tell them, hey, build a house, right? It needs a roof, so they get shingles. We tell them it needs a floor, so they grab some tiles. They know they need walls, so they go to the store and pick up sheetrock. But does having shingles, tile, and sheetrock mean you have a house? Of course not. So they start hammering more nails harder and faster without even knowing if those are the right nails in the right spot. They cut holes deeper without even knowing if those are the right holes in the right spot. They keep adding more and working harder because that's what everybody tells them to do. But time is running out and all they hear is build your house. This is the exact situation that our kids are in. They piece together a study hack they found online with something a friend is doing, but their test grades don't improve. They get the calendars, right? But they're still stressed and they procrastinate. They get the notebooks and the iPads, but their notes are still useless. Tools and materials alone don't make a house. without a blueprint, more and harder just leads to exhaustion. That's why I teach students actual strategies and frameworks that work, delivered in a critical sequence where each one builds on the one before it. Because when you follow a blueprint, the roof finally has something to sit on and the walls finally have a foundation. Can't you tell I have a history of construction? Yeah. Secret number 2. So this is the next myth that I really, really want to bust. The real way to ignite academic potential and confidence has nothing to do with motivation. That's the secret. You've probably heard or even said this yourself before. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying. If they could be more motivated, they'd be less overwhelmed. If they could just be more motivated, they would excel. If they would just do the thing and care a little bit more, everything would be fine. And that is an appealing story because it gives us hope that there is some switch to flip. But motivation is not the magic wand we think it is. Now, let's say that your young adult has been doing the work and going to class, but doesn't do well on tests. Okay, I hear that a lot too. You see them staying up late, doing what appears to be studying. I'm using air quotes if you're not watching this, on YouTube. They're rereading their notes. They're clicking through online practice games. But if they're not studying the right way, they're not really learning the material. They think they are, but they're not. So when they get a poor test grade, they think, well, that was a waste of time. Like, studying doesn't work. And when a student goes through that experience over and over again, sometimes for years, what happens to their motivation and confidence? Of course it tanks. And when that tanks, effort tanks too. Now imagine you're giving your best at work, putting in all the extra hours, but you're consistently getting poor reviews and no one is telling you how to improve. Would your motivation tank? Would someone yelling at you to want it more help? Of course not. We have to treat the cause, not the symptom. I'll bet if your student could map out their study sessions on a calendar and had total clarity about what material to learn on what days, they'd finally realize that studying does work and they would do it. I'll bet if they came out of a class with a notebook full of effective notes, they'd be more motivated to turn those notes into study resources that actually work. And then they'd be motivated to do that because they know it works. When we fix the skills shortage causing the pain, things start making sense. Progress returns. Motivation follows that. Because motivation isn't the input, it's the output. We can't force motivation. We need to empower our kids to be able to move forward, to take action, and be the source of their own motivation. And I can hear you asking me, sounds good, but how do we do that? Well, by addressing the underlying skill deficit that's keeping them in their negative feedback loop. Motivation is not the answer. Skills are. This point is so critical to understand if you're serious about supporting what's really going on with your kid. Let me give you a different way to think about it. Imagine your child wakes up tomorrow morning with some knee pain. Okay, at first you ignore it because it's kind of tolerable, and as their parent who's like really busy, you definitely don't have time to deal with this right now. And after a few days, their knee still hurts, so you tell them to take an anti-inflammatory. And then after another week or so, they've gone through a bottle of their meds, and now you're suggesting, maybe try icing the knee. Okay, and that seems reasonable. And ice works for a bit because they are totally numb, but then they try heat. And heat works for a bit, but then that stops working too. Your young adult is trying their absolute best way that they know how to make the pain disappear, but they're still in pain. And worse, the pain is now preventing them from doing the basic things that they should be able to do. So they stop. They stop functioning. And they enter a slump because they're in pain and nothing they've tried is working. Now let's look at the situation differently. Let's say that at the first twinge of knee pain, you and your child quickly realize that, Tylenol is only masking the real issue, not solving the problem. So you go to the doctor and she gives a treatment for the underlying issue itself, whatever is causing the knee pain. The new plan is to treat not the symptoms, but the actual source of the pain. And with the pain gone, your young adult is free to move forward. And that's exactly what I see all of the time with students who are losing motivation or who are overwhelmed with school. They're just told to wait it out, or worse, just to push through and handle it. Get your act together. Get an ice pack, so to speak. And all of this nonsense advice is treating the symptom and not the cause. But the core of low academic motivation, poor confidence, and overwhelm is almost always a deeper issue. And what is this issue? What's the true source of your kid's pain? A skill deficit. Now, because skill deficits are often the root cause of low school motivation and confidence, Personalized feedback is essential for students committed to building those skills. Remember, for many of our kids, these skills are brand new, or they've been taught in a piecemeal way that hasn't worked for them in the past. That's the treating the symptom error, right? So our kids are sometimes entering into this process with skepticism. That's why I provide a full year of monthly Q&A opportunities to students inside my program, SchoolHabits University, so they can ask me questions and I can keep them on track. And as they get personalized feedback on their skills grow, and so does their motivation and their confidence. Okay, moving on to secret number 3. The only thing that can prepare your teen for academic and career success is not taught in schools. Now, you've probably heard that students do better when a teacher's teaching style matches your kid's learning style, right? Visual, auditory, hands-on, whatever. Sounds logical. So what we do is we try to match our kids with the right teacher or the right class. But here's the truth. Brace yourself for this. Honestly, brace yourself for this. There is no conclusive evidence whatsoever that learning styles exist in the way we think they do. We have learning preferences, sure. No learning styles. Quick disclaimer, I am not talking about very real and valid learning disabilities that impact auditory or visual processing. Those are real, all right? And those are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this myth of learning styles. The reality is that many students have preferences, but those preferences don't determine their ability to learn. They're completely irrelevant, in fact. The real issue is that students aren't taught how to learn in different formats. If a student struggles in a lecture-based class, it's not because they aren't an auditory learner. It's because they haven't been taught how to take effective lecture notes and turn that auditory information into something they can look at and do something with. If they struggle in reading-heavy courses, it's not because they can't learn that way. It's because they don't know how to annotate and extract key information from dense text. Success comes from knowing how to adjust and process information in any format. These are just skills. They're not fixed traits of our kids. Let me put this another way. Imagine you're sending your teen on a long hiking expedition through unfamiliar terrain, okay? You've got option 1. You can try to match them with the perfect guide to get them over this one mountain, okay? And you can hope for perfect weather. But what if the guide doesn't show? What if the route changes? What if the weather turns? Okay? Or option 2, you could pack their backpack with clothing for all climates, and most importantly, teach them how to read a map and a compass. Right? You teach them how to read trail markers and handle varying terrain and move safely when conditions are rough. Because when they have the right tools and they know how to use them, they can travel through any terrain confidently, even when the path is unfamiliar, even when it's hard. And they can do it time and time again over any mountain they face, because life works by giving us mountains to climb, and we have to teach our kids how the heck to climb them. Empowering our young adults to learn how to learn is like giving them that compass and that roadmap so they can become their own guide. Schools teach content, which becomes irrelevant as soon as the class is over. Skills never expire. So what do? All right, if our kids have been building houses without blueprints, where do we start? First, we make time visible. Students need a simple system for tracking homework and tasks so they know exactly what to do and when. When we stop trusting our working memory to hold multi-step assignments and schedules, right? When we externalize, we write it down, we put it in a trusted system so the brain can focus on thinking rather than on remembering. And we need to teach our kids how to do that. Second, time management is not find more time or just stop procrastinating. Real time management is about creating a realistic plan based on real commitments. It's understanding urgent versus important, breaking big tasks into manageable sections, and building in flexibility for when things don't go to plan, because let's be honest, when do they ever? Is that just me? Third, note-taking has to serve a purpose. Notes that are too long, too short, disorganized, or copied verbatim from slides won't help. Students need to learn exactly how to extract key information and organize it so that it makes sense when they return to it, so they have a reason to return to it. There are different best practices for videos and slides and textbooks and live lectures. There is a method for each. Our kids need to know this. Fourth, annotation has to be more than just highlighting. There's a single annotation strategy that works across texts, okay? Plus unique strategies for articles, novels, and more, and what to mark and why they're marking it. Reading comprehension increases and study time decreases. Fifth, and this is the jackpot, studying has to be the real thing. Real studying is not reading or rereading. It's not skimming. It's not looking over our notes. We have to move past that absurdly nonsensical story. Real studying involves, you can tell I have feelings about this. Real studying involves specific active recall strategies that develop neural networks related to long-term memory and recall. If that was too complicated, rewind this and listen to that again. Oh my gosh, I need to settle down, but I am so dead serious. These strategies take the same amount of time, if not less, than what many students are doing now. But the difference, wait for it, is that they work. They work. Simply studying harder or longer doesn't work if the method itself is flawed. And then finally, organization matters digitally and on paper, in email and in their study spaces. When students can find what they need, when they need it, everything else gets easier. Now, I do have another quick story about Manny, a high school senior. Again, fake name, real kid. He was solid in high school. He was planning to head to college, like that was his dream. Then his motivation and his grades plummeted after first semester senior year. And everyone was like, what's wrong with Manny? And it's like, okay, well, his answer, he said he just wasn't feeling it. But, of course, start working with him. And what actually happened? It turns out that his classes up until senior year had previously provided structure, lots of it, daily homework, right? So every single day, it was just like one thing to do per class. Predictable quizzes every Friday. Teachers keeping him accountable, following up, hey, that thing's late, and then accepting the late work. He never had to think much about time management or studying because the system around him did it for him. But then senior year took that scaffolding away, as it should. And for many students, it shouldn't be there in the first place. Yes, if you have learning disabilities, you need that scaffolding. Not what I'm talking about. Okay, but over scaffolding hurts our kids. He crashed, not because he didn't care, but because he had never been taught how to create and use and rely on his own systems. So what did we do? Well, Manny learned how to break big assignments into micro steps and space out the workload across the week. He created a simple assignment tracking system so nothing slipped through the cracks, because it was. And most importantly, he learned real study techniques. Once he had the structure in place, his motivation returned because the work finally felt doable. Simple skills we're talking about here. Okay, simple skills, huge ROI, literally life-changing. Now, I know I've covered a lot. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. I cover a lot more in the full training, okay? But also, it would be impossible and irresponsible to claim that I can fully transform a student's academic trajectory in a single episode here, right? Students still need to learn how to apply these skills in the right order so that they build lasting systems instead of wasting time on hacks. They still need to know how to fold learning strategies into daily routines so studying happens naturally. They still need to learn how to capture and organize information from textbooks and lecture slides and videos to improve their understanding of what the heck they're learning in the first place. This is exactly why I created SchoolHabits University. You've heard me talk about this before. That is my comprehensive step-by-step digital program that teaches students how to study, how to get organized, how to take notes, and how to manage their time so they can become confident, independent, and prepared not just for school, but for their careers and their lives. It is self-paced, it's on demand, it comes with lifetime access, and the signature version comes with a year of monthly Q&A opportunities so students can ask me their questions, unlimited questions, and not get stuck. I designed the entire program to support those with executive function deficits and ADHD, and it comes with a juicy stack of bonuses to improve your success in the program. And this is a new addition. It comes with a parent support bundle that teaches you, the parent, how to get your kid to actually buy into the program. And it explains what your role can be as you support their journey through the lessons. And heck, so many parents who bought the course for their kids have told me that they ended up learning just as much as their young adults did. So there is like a 2-for-1 built right into it. Now, if what we talked about today resonates, I'm going to leave the link in the description so you can check it out. But let's recap what we covered today. We talked about what actually causes so many bright students to struggle. It's not a lack of effort, it's not a lack of motivation, but a lack of teachable skills. We talked about why study harder is the worst study advice if you don't know how to study in the first place. We talked about how motivation is not the input, it is the output that grows when skills and systems are in place. We challenge the learning styles myth and focus on the skills that let students learn in any format because life does not care if you're a visual learner. And we covered practical starting points like building task management systems, making time visible, taking notes that serve a purpose, annotating with intention, studying using active recall, and organizing your digital and physical materials and your space to support the work you're doing. This is what you have to do. But I want you to let me be the one to show you how to do it. So right now you have two choices. You can do nothing. Definitely a choice. You can keep trying to piece together solutions, hoping that something finally works, and let your student keep struggling, frustrated, overwhelmed, unsure how to move forward, even though they want so badly to do something different. They just don't know what. Or you can make a completely different choice. You can give your student the skills, the confidence, and the freedom to thrive, not just in school, but in their career and in their life. A clear, proven path forward. A way to stay on top of homework and deadlines with a simple, foolproof system. Walking into every test prepared and confident because they studied the material and it didn't take that long because they kind of learned it along the way. How to manage time with ease. How to take clear, effective notes. How to stay organized digitally and on paper. And check their email. Can our kids please learn how to manage their email? Develop lifelong learning skills that will serve them in school, college, and so far beyond. School doesn't have to be so hard. You can learn the skills. You can put the systems in place to handle the rest. Keep showing up. Keep doing the hard work. Keep asking the hard questions. And never stop learning.